Christ is risen. Hallelujah. Yes, well, I hope that'll get better as we go along. But that's become such a fundamental part of Easter, and it's so ancient that you might sort of think that it actually comes from Jesus, as if Jesus was raised from the dead and he stood up and went, "Oh, I am risen." And his disciples all went, "Indeed, you have been." But that's actually not the first thing that Jesus says when he's been raised from the dead. And I wonder if you might know what it is that Jesus says. Now just think about that for a second. But as I was preparing for Easter this year, I don't just sort of sit around and think pious thoughts. I have to do some research, and so I was reading a very serious commentary on the book of Matthew. It's 2 volumes, couple of thousands. I didn't read all couple of thousand pages, but just the bits that I needed to look. It's a very serious commentary. But he started talking about the first words that Jesus speaks when he's been raised from the dead. And he told a story of something that happened at a church that he'd been at when a person was doing exactly what I'm doing, asking the congregation what they thought the first words that Jesus gave when he was raised from the dead, and he was going to tell them, but then suddenly there was this little girl in the front row going, "Oh, oh, 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 pick me, pick me, pick me," and finally thought, okay, I've got to defer to this child to say, okay, you know, what? And she said, I know. Okay, what was the first words? Well, I know. He said, "Ta-da!" Now, actually, that would have been pretty cool for Jesus to have said "ta-da," because it's a pretty cool trick that he pulls off by being raised from the dead, because in the resurrection from the dead, as we're going to look at in a minute, you get 1, proof of God, 2, vindication of who Jesus is, 3, hope in the face of death. It's a pretty cool thing to pull off. It is definitely worth a ta-da! But that's not what Jesus says. That's not the first thing that Jesus says. What he says is, effectively, hi. The Greek word is karo. It's a word that means rejoice. And certainly the resurrection is something that we should rejoice over. But it was also the kind of thing you'd say to your mates when you met them in the street. You know, "G'day. Hi." I think that's brilliant. It means that Jesus isn't resurrected. Well, his resurrection means he is so much more than he was. He's nothing less than who he was. He's still Jesus. He's still the Jesus who cared for the lepers, who cared for those who sorrowed, who gave dignity to women. He's still the Jesus who cared deeply about everybody and who had friends. He's the Jesus that wants to say, "G'day" to you. We talk about Jesus being Emmanuel, God with us. I think in Jesus saying, "G'day," hi, greetings, the risen Jesus, the Lord of all, it reminds us that he is a God who is with us, not just over us, overpowering us, but he's a God who is alongside us and wants to say hello to us. And my prayer is that you will all say hello back. Christ is risen. He is risen indeed. Hallelujah.